Ray asks Cloden how he knows her grandfather. After Cloden tells her the story of her grandfather, Elliot, going to him, Cloden says that his wife is sick and that he is willing to heal her and save her unborn daughter from death in exchange for sending him his daughter when she grows up. Elliot was shocked and said, "I'm afraid you're taking this joke too far." Cloden, while sipping a glass of wine, replies, "Is that so?" Elliot's face turns red with anger, and he sees his reflection in the glass of wine. He looks at himself and thinks that there is no reason for a nobleman like him to make such ridiculous remark. He then says, "I must have misunderstood him," followed by, "I must be drunk from the wine." He then turns to Mr. Cloden and says, "To be completely honest with you, I didn't come here for the painting. I came because I heard about this medicine. My wife is sick, as you know." Mr. Cloden listens silently and asks, "Is that why you yelled at me earlier? I'm trying to help, and I must say that it hurt my feelings. Maybe I'm the only one who thinks we have some kind of bond." Then Elliot drinks the entire glass of wine and says, "As long as my daughter is born healthy with 10 fingers, nothing else matters to me. And if you're willing to help, there's no reason for me to refuse this offer." Mr. Cloden replies, "Is that so?" while sipping a glass of wine. He adds, "There will be consequences if you don't keep your promise." Mr. Elliot laughs out loud and says, "Whatever you say, sir." Mr. Cloden says, "Mr. Elliot is the first person to leave this castle alive without any harm. And his life at home was no less than perfect. Elliot's daughter grew up healthy, just as he had always hoped. And Elliot was a man who had everything until the promise he made crept up on him, and that curse was passed down from generation to generation until it finally reached Ray. After this long story, we see Ray and Cloden sleeping together in each other's arms. Cloden says, "I always take what is mine. That's why, Ray, you're in my arms now." He kisses Ray on the head and the scene changes. We see Miss Mary and she says, "I know he's the lord of this house and that he's in love with her, but shouldn't he at least have some public decency?" Then she remembers what happened earlier. "I never expected him to do such things in the hallway. Just thinking about it gives me a headache." Then we see Ray looking at Mary from behind and says, "Miss Mary?" Mary then looks at Ray and asks, "What brings you here?" She puts her hand on her head and feels pain, thinking that the Lord's actions are the cause. Ray approaches Mary and says, "Are you all right, Miss Mary?" But Miss Mary thinks she needs to be with the Lord at this hour and wonders what Ray is doing there. She says, "Nothing." Mary asks again, "What brings you here, Lady Ray?" Ray replies, "I had a question on my mind and I don't know who to ask." Miss Mary asks, "What do you want to ask, Ray?" Then asks, "Do lovers usually do that? As much as they can?" But Mary seems confused after hearing Ray's question. Ray says, "It's not what I expected. I thought lovers usually go for a walk, or go to town to do some shopping, or something." Mary thinks to herself and says, "It's natural for someone like me to expect something, but what she's saying is just a fantasy for someone like Mr. Cloden." Then Mary says to Ray, "It's normal during the first few months of marriage, especially when you're in love with someone. Mr. Cloden may be exaggerating a bit, but it's not out of the ordinary." Ray listens silently to all of this and then replies, "Okay, I understand." Lady Mary seems satisfied after getting an answer from Ray. She says to Ray, "What if you make a suggestion to Mr. Cloden? You can say that you could use a new pair of shoes. You should ask him, and I'm sure he'll get you something special." Ray's eyes are wide open, and she seems happy after hearing Lady Mary's idea. Ray says, "Should I do that? Maybe he'll ask me to go with him." Then the lady says, "Take some of his favorite snacks with you." Then Lady Mary says to Ray, "Is that enough, or do you want more?" Ray replies to Mary, holding the tray, "That's enough. Thank you, Lady Mary." Then Lady Mary thinks to herself after Ray leaves and says, "As long as he has you by the throat, your normal life is over. His obsession with you is getting worse every day, and if Lady Ray ever breaks up with him, he'll be furious. And if she ever leaves him, it's us servants who will take the brunt of it. She has the key to everything now, and if anything happens to her, I can't even imagine what will happen. She won't ask for a pair of shoes or a bouquet of flowers, and she'll let this go. I have to do something before she gets sick or bored of him." Then Lady Mary turns to the servant and says, "Where is the master?" The servant says, "I haven't seen him." The servant says, "I think he's in his study," and he asks her a question. "Why are you asking?" And she says, "There's something I need to tell him." Then the servant asks, "Are you okay, Mary? You don't look well." She ignores him completely and moves towards him. Then she thinks to herself and says, "I've been thinking about it all night. But before the lady escapes this castle, and before the servants take the brunt of everything after that, I have to intervene whenever I can. If we could just have some peace in this castle, it would be worth something. But is this the right thing to do?" Then she says, "Maybe I'm crazy. Should I go back?" Then she visits Mr. Cloden, and Cloden says, "What brings you here?" We see Cloden and Ray sleeping together on the couch. Cloden looks at Mary with an angry face. Then she continues, "I don't know if Lady Ray has told you or not, but she only has one pair of shoes. It would be nice if you could get her a new pair of shoes. She says she wants to go to the nearby town, that's what she said." Cloden says, "She didn't tell me this." And he had been listening the whole time. Then he says, "Just keep doing what you're doing and listen to her silly nonsense." And she should have someone to turn to when her only brother disappears. Mary thinks to herself and says, "You're behind all this, you monster." Then Cloden says, "I had a hard time riding my Jaguar, and now she's used to it." Then she says, "Mary, if there's nothing else you need me for, I'll leave." Cloden says, "Mary, tell the servant to get the carriage ready." Mary says in disbelief, "Do you mean the carriage?" Mary thinks to herself. Cloden is someone who has never stepped outside this castle, and now he is ready to leave this castle. Then she apologizes and leaves his room. Then we see Ray sleeping on Cloden's chest without a worry in the world. The scene changes and we see Lady Mary enter Lady Ray's room and say, "Wake up, my Lady Ray." Ray asks, "What's going on?" Lady Mary replies, "You need to get dressed quickly." Ray asks, "Do we have a guest today?" Lady Mary is busy getting Lady Ray ready to travel. Mary thinks to herself, "Why would anyone visit this cursed place?" Then she replies to Lady Ray, "No, no one is coming here." "You are leaving this castle?" Ray asks in disbelief. "What?" Outside, Lady Mary confirms, "Yes, you're going to the city with the master."